From Olympic City and the home of Pikes Peak, this is the Automotive ADHD Show with Matt West.
And we are rocking it here on the Automotive ADHD Show. Matt West here, hanging out with you, talking cars on the radio. Of course, you can listen to this show on several great radio stations here in Colorado and around the world as a podcast. I got a loaded show for you today with a very special guest in the second half of the show. We are going to talk to Torsten Gross. He recently was featured on a film that Pennzoil did, where he taught NASCAR driver Joey Logano how to drive a car just using his hands. Yeah, Torsten is a C6 quadriplegic, and he specializes in teaching other people how to drive cars, people who have reduced mobility. And this month is National Mobility Awareness Month. So I think this is going to be a really fun interview. It's going to be really cool. You're going to learn a ton about all of this stuff, and it's getting more folks out on the racetrack driving cars. Torsten has a company as well that retrofits cars and trains drivers how to drive them. So this is really cool. We're going to get to that. Before we get to that, though, I am going to talk a little bit about how we are standing up for the K cars, not the Chrysler K cars. We're talking about the KEI, Jidosha, Japanese cars, which the government has decided should no longer be on our roadways. So we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about a few other cool things. The new Lamborghini on the way has a 10,000 RPM V8, 10,000 RPMs. We're going to get to that and more right here on the Automotive ADHD Show. Now, one thing I got to get to here really quick. It is Memorial Day, and Memorial Day weekend, I should say. And there are going to be a ton of people. Well, they're already out on the roadways. So according to AAA, Memorial Day weekend, specifically this Memorial Day weekend, they're expecting the second highest number of travelers since they started keeping track back in 2000. They're projecting that almost 44 million people are going to head 50 miles or more from home for Memorial Day. But here's what's really interesting. This being a car show, that a tremendous number of those people are going to be traveling by car for Memorial Day weekend. I mean, like a majority of people. They're expecting 38.4 million people to travel by car this weekend. And that, I think, is, well, as a car show, as someone who hosts a car show, I think that's great news. That's great news. That is folks getting out and enjoying the beautiful roadways that we have here in the United States, all across the country, the great American road trip, you could say. And now, there are some stats, though. If you are traveling by car, there's some things that you do need to know and that are relevant, which is namely peak travel time. So with this many people on the roadways, traffic is going to be bonkers. In fact, yesterday, Friday, if you're listening to this on the podcast, it could be any day. But yesterday was nuts in the city here in the Springs. Traffic was just bonkers. And that's probably true for every major city, especially going into this Memorial Day weekend. And now, that being said, there are some times that you do want to travel, okay? So if you are going to be doing it, you basically want to avoid peak times. Now, the trick to this is if everyone avoids peak times, then we get new peak times. So I'm giving you some inside information. Don't tell anybody else, okay? Just you and me and whoever is listening in on the radio. But for Saturday, today, between 2 and 5 p.m. is the worst time to travel. So they're saying, AAA says, before 1 p.m. and after 6 p.m. That's the best time to get on the roads. Sunday, between 3 and 7, that's when you don't want to be on the roadways, before 1 p.m. And then Monday is going to be pretty hectic because people are all coming back from wherever they went. And Monday, that's going to be 3 to 7 p.m. And then they're saying the best travel time is only after 7. It's really no other time, after 7 o'clock. So if you are on the roadways, though, just plan that things are going to take a little bit longer. Of course, keep your car stocked up with all sorts of good snacks and things. If you're doing a road trip, that's a requirement. I'm just saying you have to have snacks and stuff in the car, but obviously have some other things too that are helpful. Have a air compressor for your tires if you get a flat. Simple stuff. Make sure your oil's topped up. All of that stuff that we should all already do as drivers of cars, but most of us don't. So you definitely want to get in and do that. Of course, though, too, I do want to say, with it being Memorial Day weekend, it is a great time not just to go out on a road trip and have a barbecue, but remember the reason for Memorial Day and why we get to celebrate it. That is very important, just saying. So I got to talk here a little bit about K-Trucks now. I talked about this a few weeks back. If you're unfamiliar, we're not talking about the Chrysler K platform of cars. That is different. That may be what more people here in the United States are familiar with. But over the past couple of decades, there has been a huge following for these small mini cars that are imported from Japan. And I mean a huge following. This isn't some niche thing anymore. These are getting big enough that the government is noticing, and they're not happy about it. And I talked about this before and how we had some actual victory, sort of, across the country with Texas specifically saying that they weren't going to legislate K cars out of existence. Now, again, if you're not familiar with the K cars, it stands for K-Jidosha, which is Japanese for tiny little small car that's really fun. I don't know. It's probably something like that. But anyway, they are mini cars. They're limited to about 660 cc's in engine displacement. They're small. They're made for the narrow roads of Japan, and they're made to be ultra fuel efficient. They're also designed to skirt around some heavier taxes, specifically in Japan, because Japan likes to regulate things via engine displacement. So the bigger displacement you have, the, in theory, more fuel you're going to burn, and therefore the more taxes they're going to tax you on. Glad we don't do it that way here in America. Love our big displacement stuff. But a lot of people love these little K cars too. And they can be everything from little trucks. You've seen, I guarantee you've probably seen them, these little mini trucks, usually kind of a cab over style mini truck. But that's not just limited to that. There's vans, which are really fun and cool. There are also sports cars. There are the Suzuki Cappuccinos, the Honda Beat, the AutoZam AZ1. These are really interesting sports cars from the bubble era of Japan's bubble economy back in the 1990s. So there are cool cars. And the way you import stuff to the United States, it's got to be 25 years old. If it's not 25 years old, it is significantly harder and near impossible for the everyday man to import something from Japan. But as soon as it turns 25, all bets are off. Doesn't matter. It doesn't have to pass safety. It doesn't have to do emissions. Doesn't have to do anything. As long as it's 25, comes into the United States, you pay your customs and your import fees and stuff like that, but you can get it here and drive it legally on the roadways. Now, the problem has been different states are looking at these K trucks and saying, well, these little trucks didn't pass safety requirements. They didn't pass American safety requirements. And so we think we should not have them on the roadways anymore. And Rhode Island, and if you live in Rhode Island and you listen to this on the podcast or the stream online, I know people do. I see you in the analytics. I know you're there. But if you live there, you gotta get in touch with your legislators, because this is dumb what Rhode Island is doing. We had a victory in Texas a few weeks back. Rhode Island said, well, Texas is doing that, so we're not, basically. And the issue here is what Rhode Island essentially has done is they have sent out letters to owners of these K trucks who, bear in mind, legally imported them, paid to register them, paid to do all of this stuff. And they said, hey, you can't have this car anymore. You need to relinquish your registration. Can they do this? They say they can, and I'm going to tell you why they can't and why it's dumb that they are. Coming up here after the break, we're also going to talk to Torsten Gross, and he is going to talk about how you can drive a car, just your hands. That's on the way here on Automotive ADHD.
And now for how things work with an engineer.
Transmissions. Shift.
And that was how things work with an engineer. More of How Things Work can be found at facebook.com/automotive-ADHD.
Hey, remember, you can send those car sounds into the show, facebook.com/automotive-ADHD for your chance to have them played right here on the radio. Good stuff there. Of course, I love playing listener-submitted car sounds here on the show. My name is Matt West. You're listening to the Automotive ADHD show. And before the break here, I was talking about K-Trucks, K-E-I, K-Jidosha. That's Japanese for tiny, cool, fun little truck. Or, well, cars, not just limited to trucks. And before we talk to my guest coming up here in the next segment, Torsten Gross, who was recently featured on a Pennzoil film where he taught Joey Logano how to drive with just his hands. This is really cool. He's going to come up here in the next segment, so don't go anywhere. But with K-Trucks, the state of Rhode Island, before the break, I was telling you how they have now sent letters to owners of these K vehicles that are, that again are very quickly becoming a more than a niche type of car. Lots of people are getting these things because they're cool. They're fuel efficient. They're, they're just practical, fun cars that, you even see people using these for business and all sorts of things. So, but the Rhode Island basically said, hey, look, you can't have this thing anymore. They issued a letter to all of the people who had registered these K-Trucks saying they needed to relinquish their registration. And this comes by way of Tara Herlin at Hemmings, by the way, who writes about this. And they said that, and essentially what's going on here is that the DMV basically says we've deemed these vehicles unsafe for the roads. They're small. They don't meet crash requirements or anything. And typically, these vehicles weigh around 1,500 pounds and max out at about 75 miles per hour, by the way. Real dangerous vehicles, just so you know. The 660cc max engine displacement on most of them. So anyway, but they say because they were never manufactured in compliance with safety standards, the K-Trucks have to go. And this doesn't make any sense to me. This doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. And I talked about this a few weeks ago on the show, like I said, but one of the reasons for this is, okay, so if these K vehicles, which are 25 years old and are legal to import into the United States without really any restrictions, if they are so unsafe, then why aren't other cars that are older than 25 years old having their registrations revoked? Why is someone driving around in a 1982 Toyota Corolla having their registration revoked? Why is that? Why isn't someone driving a 1965 Mustang having their registration revoked? Those are all vehicles that predated existing safety standards. And people will say, well, yeah, but the K-Truck didn't even meet the safety standards of the time. Well, here's the other thing. And I got to throw this out there. And, well, motorcycles don't meet any of those safety standards, yet we allow them to be on the road. And in fact, I would argue you are probably less safe on a motorcycle than you are in a K vehicle, a small mini K vehicle. Because the K vehicles, for all intents and purposes, can do the national speed limit. That's fine. But you still have some metal around you, right? If you're on a motorcycle and someone rear ends you, even at a low speed, you're going to have a bad day. It's not going to be fun. So, and if someone rear ends you in a K vehicle, you'll probably have a bad day, but you wouldn't have as bad of a day as if you were just on a motorcycle. I'm just saying. So the argument that these vehicles are unsafe, and by the way, the government, and especially Rhode Island, hasn't provided any actual statistics, safety stuff to indicate that these are a problem, to indicate that people are getting hurt driving these. They haven't provided any of that. Why? Because they probably don't have any of that, for the record. And that to me is, it's just somebody in a position of power in the government in Rhode Island who basically just looked at this and said, that's probably unsafe. Let's get rid of that, without any actual basis for what it is, or perhaps comparing it to other vehicles. And, I'm of the opinion, if you want to bring a K truck, K car, K sports car, K van, whatever, K everything, right? If you want to bring that into the United States, go for it. Do it. Drive what you want and drive what makes you happy. I have the same opinion when it comes to the whole EV debate. Drive what makes you happy. Okay? That's what you should do. I mean, the government shouldn't be telling you that you can't drive something, and they also shouldn't be telling you that you should drive something. It goes both ways. They set a minimum safety standard that is adhered to with modern vehicles. But should you choose to drive an old vehicle that predates that safety standard? That's on you. If you get hurt doing it, it is also your responsibility. But I think the number of people who, perhaps are involved in crashes with these K vehicles, I don't even think there are statistics around it because it is such a small number of them. Because, like I was saying earlier in the show, these are quickly becoming not a niche thing. They've been a kind of a niche, small item that, a lot of people don't have. We're seeing more of them. But even then, that is so significantly smaller in percentage of K vehicles to other things. It's so drastically smaller that I don't think we're in any real danger for, they're going to take over the roads and everyone's going to be driving these unsafe cars. You know what? If everyone wants to drive these unsafe cars, let them. They know it's unsafe. If they know, right? Let them do it. But the good news here for Rhode Island here is that they have support. Rhode Islanders have support in the Congress, by the way, and they have support from people who basically, probably quite frankly, agree with me that why would you ban these K vehicles when there's people on motorcycles, there's people in other older cars on the roadways? You would have to ban all of those, and I'm not saying you should, but I'm saying in order to logically ban K vehicles, you would have to ban everything older than 25 years and motorcycles and bicycles. And in fact, you just have to ban walking outside because something might hit you, right? And Senator Louis P. DePalma is also proposing some legislation as well. So you've got senators and you've got congressmen backing this. You've got a lot of things going well with this. The senators' legislation would grandfather all existing K trucks in Rhode Island, allowing them to continue registering their trucks. However, the one issue I see with it is not an outright stop on the DMV's overreach here, because it does not allow new registrations of K vehicles. So that's problematic if you own one of these vehicles and you want to sell it, because you really can't. You would have to sell it for off-road use only, and that's going to drastically affect the value. Now, granted, most of the K vehicles, especially the trucks, they're not worth a lot. I have been known to browse a late-night Japanese auction site looking at these things, and you can get them for like $900. Albeit, it's like $2,500 to ship it, and then another $600 or $700 for customs and import stuff, and then you got to ship it from a port of entry in the United States to wherever you are. I'm in Colorado, obviously, so we're about as far inland as it gets. But that being the case, I mean, they're cheap, right? They're not expensive. But that's not the point. The point isn't that they're not expensive so people can afford to just, oh, well, I guess I can't drive it anymore. No, out of principle, we should be pushing back on this. So I applaud Senator Louis P. DePalma for their legislation, though, if anything, I would criticize that for not being encompassing enough. But at least it's a stopgap to prevent the DMV from actually, revoking these registrations as it stands right now. And by the way, the DMV pushed back on that bill, saying, quote, a handful still remain registered, and the proposed bill would restrain the DMV's ability to further eliminate unsafe vehicles from the public roadways of the state. That's, again, they are missing the point entirely, which is that they're not that unsafe compared to other vehicles on the roadways. Why do you allow, 50cc mopeds on the roadways? One might argue with motorcycles, my comparison with that, one could argue that, well, yeah, but motorcycles are faster and they've got power and they can get out of situations and they're more maneuverable. Okay, fine. You're still, you're still a soft target on a motorcycle. But hear me out. 50cc mopeds can engage in use on the roadways. No problem. They're slow. They're not maneuverable. We allow those on the roadways. And in fact, many states don't even require you to have a extra motorcycle endorsement on your license to drive one of those. But we don't want to allow K-trucks. See, I don't see the logic here. And the reason for that is because there is no logic here. That's why. The DMV is just overstepping their bounds drastically. And for some reason, targeting these vehicles, which again there's not even any data to say that they're unsafe. There's not even any studies that show, wow, way more people are dying in these things. Not that many people are driving them in the first place. So we need to support K vehicles wherever you are. Tell people, hey, these cool little K trucks are fun. Go buy one. They're $900. Go buy one. That's my official. I'll stop ranting about K trucks here, and I got to talk a little bit here in this before we wrap up about my next guest joining me on the show, Torsten Gross. I mentioned him at the top of the show, and he was in a feature video that Pennzoil did, and I'm going to roll a clip of this video here for you, just so you can kind of get an idea of what's going on before he comes on here after the next break. Go ahead and check this out.
Two-time NASCAR Cup Series champion Joey Logano has been behind the wheel since he was 10.
Joey Logano just punched his ticket.
But what if he had to compete using only his hands?
Back ahead to the championship debate.
Need a hand? Introducing Torsten Gross, pioneering race car driver and founder of the Just Hands Foundation. Basically, Torsten's a bat, changing how people drive. Today, he's going to show Joey how he competes using only his hands.
All right, so show me how you drive this thing. You got hand controls, you got a whole bunch of different things I haven't seen before.
Pay attention now. This is the part where Torsten shows off the amazing setup that helps more people get behind the wheel.
This is my tri-pen. It allows me to control the steering wheel without much grip. These are my Vigo Classic 2 hand controls. Turn for gas, push for brake. And this is Pennzoil. It maximizes engine protection.
And he is going to be joining me right here after the break. We're going to talk all about what it takes to modify a car so you can drive it just with your hands, why he's doing it, and of course, his company that is getting people behind the wheel who thought that they couldn't. This is really awesome. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to Automotive ADHD, and it's right here.
And now for how things work with an engineer.
Engines. Spin.
And that was how things work with an engineer. More of how things work can be found at facebook.com/automotive-ADHD.
Colorado Springs' #1 car show by default. This is Automotive ADHD.
And welcome back to the Automotive ADHD show. Now, I have a very special guest joining me here for he is a C6 quadriplegic, and he did an amazing thing with Joey Logano recently, who drove we'll say a very modified car that really highlights some of the amazing things that we can do with technology, but things that we can do with allowing people that have maybe issues with mobility to be able to drive race cars and go fast and do what we love as car enthusiasts. This is really amazing. And of course, by the way, it is Mobility Awareness Month, and my guest joining me, I'm really excited to have him on the show. His name is Torsten Gross. Welcome to the show, Torsten.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit real quick about your background. Now, you're C6 quadriplegic. Tell me a little bit first, though, about your background and maybe how things are now. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I'm, by trade, I'm an ad guy, marketing guy, which, I do fractional CMO work, chief marketing officer work, and I do that, but I also do public speaking, and I have a charity called Just Hands, all alongside being a budding race car driver.
Okay. And now it's always a thing I like to ask folks, but what got you into racing? Because, not everyone's into racing. There's a few of us, but definitely not everybody.
My wife knew that, and she got me a track day at Lime Rock Park, which is arguably the most strategic racetrack in the country here in upstate Connecticut. And, I had never thought about, we moved up here after COVID, and I never thought about race car driving because, the saying, if you can't see it, you can't be it. Well, I never really saw people in chairs racing or even tracking, right? Just getting on the track and enjoying that time. And so it never really crossed my mind, but she just got it for me. And that was the day the addiction started.
Yeah, see, that's one of those things you definitely can't quit, right? There's no quitting slowly either with racing. It's something you kind of got it in your blood, and whether or not you know it, I think it's definitely there. And so tell me a little bit too about your background specifically when it comes to when it comes to being a quadriplegic, right? Was this some way you were? Was it born this way, or did you have something happen? Tell me a little bit about that. And I'm trying to ask that in a way that's not sounding bad, but I'm just curious. I'd like to know.
Look, I'm personally somebody who thinks one should always ask, because making assumptions is more dangerous than asking, right? And so I appreciate you asking. When I was 15, I dove in the ocean, broke my neck 36 pieces, and was what they call clinically dead for 2.5 minutes. Which, I often get the sideways head tilt, the awe moment, the oh my God moment. And I'll say it was one of the best things that could have happened to me. It's life is still really good. And I think while it seems like such a big thing, and it really was right at the time, you manage life in whatever way you need to manage it.
Right.
And it doesn't really matter what it is, whether or not it's quadriplegia or depression or ADHD or whatever it is, right? Tourette's, everybody's got their thing, and mine happens to be being a quad. And so, this will be my 30-year anniversary coming up in July.
Wow. And what I think is really special is, how you're taking this too, and, you're developing stuff that, a lot of people, lots of, quads and people across the world might be able to say, hey, he's doing that, right? And that's something I can do, right? Because maybe they're not thinking, maybe they're not in that mindset that you have, which is, if I can see it, I can do it, right? And maybe with what you're doing, you're able to kind of pull them into that mindset a little bit too. So now tell me a little bit about some of the modifications that are made so that you can drive a car. And again, drive a car, fast. You're ripping around the track. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so there are a couple of different modifications. One is what's called a tri-pin. And for somebody that has very little grip in their hands, basically it clamps onto the wrist, and then you've got something under your fingers, and that allows you to steer from a steering perspective. But paraplegics would have a knob, right? And so that's what you would know of as a suicide knob. It makes it easier to steer with one hand so that you're not using your palm because you want grip at all times, especially when you're going at speed. The second thing are the hand controls. So I use what's called Vigo Classic 2 hand controls. They are everyday street hand controls. They are turn for gas and push for brake. Now, like in all track cars, everybody has their perspective on what they think works the best and what's great. And I say that because there are different variations of hand control driving. There's left hand brake throttle. There's right hand brake throttle, and then there's these rings that go on steering wheel that work as well. I could get into an hour-long discussion as to why I think the ones I use are the best, and I'm sure other people that are listening that are in chairs might say, well, mine are even better than that. And that's fine, right? Whatever it is that you use works for you. And then the last thing is Velcro on the ground. And that is because if our legs don't have muscle tone and movement, we don't want our legs flopping around. Because just like an able-bodied driver, you want to be one with the car.
Right.
And so that means that we tape down our legs. I'll go one step further and say that we have, for us, 6-point harness and racing seats are just as, if not even more important, because people without back muscles or very limited back muscles, you don't want to be worried about keeping yourself balanced, right, while you're going through turns. You don't want that for able-bodied people either, but you guys can use your feet, right, and your legs to stabilize yourself a little bit. We can't. So having a really good race seat and really good harnesses is paramount.
Well, and that's, I think, one thing especially, folks probably don't think of when they think of modifying a car in such a way, because, yeah, you're right. And we don't even think about it, right? If we're supporting ourselves in our seat, you're using a lot of your core, you're using a lot of these different muscles that on a daily basis, no one even thinks about the fact that we're even using them. So that
100%.
makes tremendous sense there. And I assume, obviously, the different modifications are, like you said, everyone's kind of got a little different way of doing it, probably because not everyone's the same. Maybe someone's got a little more grip strength. Maybe someone's got a little more movement here, right? Is that true?
Yeah, and it's how we learned. So in Europe, 99% of drivers drive with their right hand brake throttle. Here, 95% of the drivers drive with their left hand brake throttle.
Okay.
And so there's I won't go into the whole detail, but I can say everyone that goes through our program that then tries the right hand controls moves over to them. But weirdly enough, we don't teach right hand controls here in this country. And so that is something that we're slowly starting to change. And we're also coming out with hand controls very shortly that allow you to shift with your fingers.
Okay.
And that's going to be a major game changer.
Wow. All right. So we're going to come up here on a break, but I want to ask you a little bit about that. I want to ask you also a little bit specifically about teaching Joey Logano to use the hand controls too. And I'm sure a guy like him, he jumped in there and he's like, let's do it. Let's learn it. Let's do some really cool stuff with this. So I want to ask you about all of these things and more. Torsten, hang with me here through the break. Again, my guest is Torsten Gross. We are talking about modifying cars so that people with reduced mobility can drive them, and importantly, drive them fast and have fun. You're listening to Automotive ADHD. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back after the break.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Speed Council proudly presents Automotive ADHD, now on video.
For better or for worse, subscribe to Automotive ADHD, now playing on YouTube and Rumble.
And continuing here on the Automotive ADHD show, Matt West here, hanging out with you, talking cars with a very special guest, Torsten Gross. He is a C6 quadriplegic who is doing some really amazing work in the field of converting race cars so that people with reduced mobility can drive them. And of course, this month, by the way, is National Mobility Awareness Month. Now, Torsten had an amazing opportunity to drive with Joey Logano and retrofit one of the cars so that Joey could learn what it's like to drive a car that's been modified this way. And this is really cool. Now, there is a video, by the way, done by Pennzoil, and we're going to link that on the Facebook page, facebook.com/automotive ADHD. Now, Torsten, welcome back to the Automotive ADHD show.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. So I want to talk a little bit here about the car in particular that Joey drove. So it's a Mustang Dark Horse, but it's not stock. Let's get that out of the way first. It's definitely not stock, and it's very. We were talking in the previous segment about some of the hand controls and how some of that stuff works. But tell me about this specific setup.
Yeah, so this was exactly what I said. It's the right hand controls, turn for gas, push for brake. And he had a steering knob on the left-hand side. Look, I put him through what other people had to go through as well. Even though he can use his legs, I made him tape his legs down to the side of the car. I made him cross his legs so that he couldn't use it. use them. I treated him like just another driver that I normally put through a program on our end. And the difference is that he's never driven with hand controls before, but he caught on really quickly.
That is amazing. And of course, I think, a guy like him, I think, is probably willing to jump into a challenge there. I mean, for I think any of us driving on the road, a lot of us probably can't relate to using hand controls. But even then, when you're talking about, using your hand to do throttle and stuff, if folks have ridden an ATV, for example, with a, hand throttle like that, they might be able to kind of start at least to see the seeds of what that's like a little bit. Now, in terms of going on track, I mean, you run a program, and your program is a charity, which is called Just Hands Charity. And tell me a little bit about what Just Hands is doing and how Just Hands is getting guys behind the wheel who maybe for one reason or another thought that they couldn't. You're kind of giving them some hope with that.
Yeah, look, Pennzoils are one of our biggest supporters. And so, I'm so excited. Not only did they allow me to do this project with Joey, but they're such a supporter of the mission that we have. And we share the mission of I'm going to say equality. And the reason why I say that is because track driving is and being on track is the only sport for disabled people that makes us equal with able-bodied people. You and I will never ski in the same division together. You and I will never do marathon in the same division. You and I will never play basketball in the same division. However, track driving, car doesn't care that I'm in a chair, and nobody on the track knows that I'm in a chair. So we're fully equal, and that is such an amazing thing, right? And so I started Just Hands because I needed to share that with other people. So we have people come to us. We've had people fly from Europe, from California, everywhere to come to us to learn track driving. And that is everything from, as simplistic as ride-alongs, where I put them in the car and I scare them, all the way to autocross and traditional track driving. So we've got a couple cars here. We've got a car at Spa in Belgium. We've got a car at Nürburgring in Germany. And we're about to put some more here in this country as well.
That's great. And, with Just Hands, you're able to really, I think, get guys like I was saying on the track and, maybe even encouraging folks to pursue a career in this, and I mean, racing is it's something that we love from a hobbyist perspective all the way to the professional level of things. Now, tell me a little bit too, real quick, when we're looking at some of the things that Just Hands uses, to convert these cars. What technologies are you seeing that as technology is increasing, as it's improving, as electronics are getting better? Are you seeing that things are only going to get even better for folks with reduced mobility?
I hear that question occasionally. And what shocks most people is that the hand controls that we use have been in cars so I've been in chair now 30 years before me.
Okay.
Right. So they've been there a lot. The exposure of the hand controls has not really been there. So it's not super new technology per se. What is new though is, we're working right now to create a racing edition of the hand controls where you're going to be able to use your fingers to shift and things like that. Those advancements are very welcome, but all in all, it's very simplistic and fairly inexpensive. We're talking $2,000 to $3,000 to retrofit a car. So it's not as, look, if you're getting in the race car world, you're spending money anyway, right? So
you're spending more than $2,000 to $3,000. I'll tell you that.
Well, yeah, a little bit more than that, right? So, but $2,000 to $3,000, is capable, right, or reachable for a lot of folks. And it's that simple. And look, you can put the hand controls in. It only takes a couple hours to put them in. But once they've been put in, I can still drive with able-bodied drivers. Mm-hmm. So some of my teammates they still use their feet to drive.
Right. Well, and I like how you said that, racing and with cars, that's the great equalizer here with that, because you're right, with regardless of, who's sitting in that seat, that car, you point it in the right direction, you hit those apexes in the right way, you're going to be doing just as good as the next guy. And I really love, I really love that. And I think that what you're doing with Just Hands is really great. Now, tell me where people can find more about Just Hands.
Yeah, go to justhands.org. You can go to our Instagram, Just Hands Foundation, or look me up, torstengross.com, and that'll point you there as well. Not many Just Hands out there, so you Google us, you'll find us pretty quickly.
Fantastic. And now as we wrap up, one question I often like to ask guys, especially guys who work in the racing industry, who get on track a lot. You know, we're talking to dudes who oftentimes are driving crazy race cars. Torsten, what is in your garage at home right now? What interesting, cool, maybe daily drivers, totally interesting daily drivers do you have?
My daily driver is an Audi A6, and then to get to and from the track to tow my race car, I've got a Silverado 1500, and then my race car itself is a 981 Porsche Cayman.
Okay, fantastic. And I assume obviously fitted with some of the hand controls you were just talking about, and just going to show that, I think your story and what you're talking about, what especially Just Hands Foundation is doing, I think really is a great way for people to be encouraged. I think for people, especially who have reduced mobility, to be encouraged, to do great stuff and get out there, get on the racetrack. But also, I think, as a reminder for those of us who, are able-bodied, to take a look at everything that's going on and say, hey, this is amazing. Look what these folks are doing. This is really great. We need to get behind this and we need to support it. And I think this is really good stuff that you're doing, Torsten. I want to thank you so much for joining me here on Automotive ADHD.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me and giving me the time. I appreciate it.
Remember to check out his website, torstengross.com, and give Just Hands a follow on Instagram. And a big thank you to you as well for joining me on this edition of the show. Before we wrap things up, got to tell you, I will be at the Pikes Peak Hill Climb Fan Fest doing this show live from there. That is coming up here in June now. It's going to be taking over all of downtown Colorado Springs. It's going to be so much fun. This will be the third time this show has been out there. We're going to be getting some great racing drivers on. We might have an appearance from Jimmy Ford and whoever else we can find on the streets of the Fan Fest. And of course, if you're listening in the Springs, you can also come visit the show. Come see it in person. I'm going to be posting more about that on the Facebook as we get closer. Facebook.com/Automotive ADHD. Coincidentally, also where you can send those car sounds into my show, and I'll play them here on the radio. Now, thanks for joining me on this edition of the Automotive ADHD Show. Remember to subscribe to the podcast wherever fine shows and this one are downloaded. We're on YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, iTunes, iHeart. If you're on Spotify, give it a 5-star rating. I'll talk to you next week.